Welcome back, everyone. For this deep dive, we're doing something a little different.
Oh,
Yeah, we're going exploring, kind of like digital archaeologists. We're digging into some lost media to see what we can learn about mental health. It's
interesting.
like we're dusting off this hidden artifact, to uncover the wisdom it holds.
And what kind of artifact are we talking about here?
Well, it's not some ancient scroll or anything. It's actually a transcript from a YouTube video.
Okay, a YouTube video. But you said lost media, so I'm guessing it's not easy to find anymore?
Exactly. It's disappeared from the platform, vanished. But even though it's gone, the transcript still has a lot to teach us, especially about supporting people who struggle with mental health.
I see. So like a hidden treasure just waiting to be rediscovered.
That's a great way to put it.
Hmm.
Okay, so the source material today is a transcript from a YouTube video called Let's Heed by Andrew A.J. Johnson.
Let's heed. Okay.
And in this video, Johnson argues that just telling someone to get over it can actually be really harmful. It can make
Mm.
their suffering even worse.
Yeah, I can see how that would be invalidating. Like you're not taking their pain seriously.
Exactly. It's a point that really made me stop and think, It made me rethink how I approach these conversations.
It's a powerful example of how much words matter,
Hmm.
especially when someone is already feeling vulnerable.
So let's dive into this whole let's heed concept.
Okay, yeah, let's.
Johnson presents it as an online resource, but it's about so much more than just awareness. He wants people to understand the everyday challenges people with mental illness face and to recognize that, these conversations need to happen all the time.
Right, it's not just about having a mental health awareness day once a year and then forgetting about it.
Exactly. It's about integrating these conversations into our daily lives, making it normal to talk about mental health.
And hopefully chipping away at the stigma that surrounds mental illness in the process.
Okay, so let's talk about stigma for a second. It's a word we hear a lot, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, Johnson breaks stigma down into two main parts. Negative stereotypes, which are basically the beliefs we hold about mental illness,
Okay.
and then discriminatory behaviors, which are the actions we take based on those beliefs.
I see. So it's not just about what we think, but also how we act towards people with mental illness.
Exactly. And he makes this really interesting point. He says that just educating people about mental illness isn't always enough to get rid of stigma.
Really? Why not?
Because, knowledge doesn't always translate into changed behavior.
Ah, that makes sense.
Like, you can know that something is wrong, but still do it anyway.
Yeah.
We need to actively challenge our own biases and make a conscious effort to treat everyone with respect and understanding.
Regardless of their mental health status.
Yes, exactly.
It's like, how people say recycling is good for the environment, but then they still throw their plastic bottles in the trash.
Yeah, there's a disconnect between knowing the right thing to do and actually doing it. So how do we bridge that gap when it comes to mental health? What actions can we actually take to make a difference?
That's the big question, right? Well, Johnson outlines 3 core strategies: communication, active listening, and giving our time and energy.
Those sound pretty straightforward.
Yeah, they might seem like basic human interactions, but when you apply them to supporting people with mental illness, they become really powerful tools.
I like that. So let's start with communication then. We all know that words have power, but what are some of the things we need to be careful about when talking to someone about their mental health?
I think we've all heard those phrases like, you don't look depressed, or just snap out of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And while people might say them with good intentions, they actually kind of invalidate the person's experience.
And they can make the person feel even more alone.
It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off.
Ouch, yeah. You wouldn't do that, right?
Right. It's dismissive. It
Yeah.
minimizes their pain. And I think a lot of us, without realizing it, have probably said things like that before.
Oh, absolutely. I know I have. But if we're not supposed to offer advice or tell someone how they should be feeling, what are we supposed to do?
Well, Johnson says we need to approach these conversations with empathy and understanding.
Okay, so create a safe space for open and honest dialogue.
Yeah, where the person feels heard and validated. But I get it. It can be hard to know what to say sometimes.
Totally. Like, I don't want to sound fake or make things worse. Are there any specific things he suggests we do?
He says instead of using those dismissive phrases, try using more empathetic ones. So, for example, instead of saying, you don't look anxious, you could say something like, I'm here for you. What can I do to help?
Oh, I see. So it's about shifting the focus from judgment to genuine care and concern.
Exactly. You're acknowledging their feelings and offering support without trying to fix them or tell them how they should be feeling.
Which is so important.
It's about being present with them in their experience, even if we don't completely understand it.
Okay, so we've talked about mindful communication. What about Johnson's second strategy, active listening? I think a lot of people assume they're good listeners already, but is there a difference between just hearing someone and actively listening?
Oh yeah, definitely. Active listening is about engaging with the speaker on a much deeper level.
How so?
Well, it's not just about hearing the words. It's about paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language, the emotions they're expressing.
So it's about being totally present in the conversation without distractions or judgment.
Exactly. It's not just nodding along and saying, every few seconds.
It's about showing them that you're truly invested in what they have to say.
Right.
So how can we practice active listening? Are there specific things we can do?
In the transcript, he talks about using verbal cues to show you're engaged. Things like summarizing what the speakers said to make sure you understand, asking clarifying questions, and reflecting their emotions back to them. For example, you could say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed right now. Am I getting that right?"
Those are really good tips. It's about making the person feel heard and understood, which I imagine can be incredibly validating when they're struggling.
Yeah. And there's another important distinction he makes, the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
He's really emphasizing that empathy is not just feeling sorry for someone. It's about stepping into their shoes and trying to see the world from their perspective, even if you've never been through what they're going through.
So you're trying to connect with them on an emotional level, not just a logical one.
Yes. It's about acknowledging that their feelings are valid, regardless of whether you personally agree with them or not.
Sympathy is more surface level, while empathy requires us to dig deeper and truly connect with the other person's experience.
Right. Like, it's the difference between saying, "Oh, that's too bad," and "I can't imagine how difficult that must be for you."
Exactly. And that deeper level of understanding is what allows us to offer truly meaningful support.
Absolutely.
Okay, so communication and active listening, those are both crucial for building trust and understanding. But sometimes, people need more than just kind words. They need actual tangible support.
That's true.
And that brings us to Johnson's third strategy, giving our time and energy.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, on the surface it does, but I think there's more to it than meets the eye. What are some of the nuances of this strategy?
You're right. It's not always that simple. Offering genuine support, it takes more than just saying, "I'm here for you."
Uh-huh.
You have to actually follow through, you know? Do things that show you're really committed.
Yeah, I think we've all been guilty of offering that kind of like superficial support at some point.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like sending a quick text message, "Kay."
We're saying busy when someone reaches out wanting to talk.
Yeah, exactly. In the moment, it feels easier, than having a potentially difficult conversation.
But it can leave the other person feeling like you don't really care.
Absolutely. And that's where Johnson challenges us to think differently, to go beyond those dismissive responses and offer real, concrete alternatives.
So what does that look like?
Well, instead of saying that vague, "Let me know if you need anything," try suggesting a specific time to chat or offer to do something together.
Oh, okay. So instead of putting it on them to reach out again, you're taking the initiative.
Right.
Like, hey, I'd love to hear more about what's going on. Can we talk tomorrow afternoon? Or want to go for a walk this weekend and catch up?
So it's about turning those good intentions into actions.
Exactly. And even if you genuinely can't talk at that moment, you can still be supportive by being honest about your availability.
Right. Instead of just saying, "I'm busy," you could say something like, "Hey, I'm swamped right now, but can I call you back later tonight?"
Exactly. It shows that you respect their time and that you're making an effort.
And I really appreciate that he talks about the power of retroactive apologies.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's such an important point. Because we've all had those times where we weren't there for someone like we should have been.
We've all messed up. Yeah.
And just acknowledging those past mistakes and trying to make things right can mean a lot.
It shows humility,
Yeah.
and a willingness to grow,
Mm-hmm.
which are essential for any relationship, really.
So these three strategies,
Yeah.
communication, active listening, giving time and energy, they seem so fundamental, so basic.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us struggle to actually put them into practice.
It's true. But why is individual action so crucial? Why can't we just rely on therapists and the government to help people with mental illness?
That's a good question.
Well, Johnson talks about that in the video. And while those systems are super important, they do have their limitations.
Like what?
Well, he points out that there are millions of people around the world who suffer from mental illness.
Right.
And if everyone suddenly tried to get professional help, The system would be totally overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's like expecting a single lifeboat to rescue everyone from a sinking ship.
It's just not realistic. And that's why individual action is so important. We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix things.
So we need to step up and create a more supportive environment ourselves.
Exactly. He also makes this really powerful connection between mental illness and trauma.
Okay, what do you mean?
He says people aren't born with mental illness. It often develops because of negative experiences or things in their environment.
So it's not a personal failing.
Not at all. It's a human response to difficult situations.
I see. So if individuals aren't solely responsible for managing their mental health, who is? Where does the responsibility lie?
He argues that it's a shared responsibility. People with mental illness definitely have a role to play, like advocating for themselves and seeking help.
Right.
But healthcare providers need to offer good quality care that's accessible and affordable. Support networks like family and friends need to be understanding and helpful.
And society as a whole needs to prioritize mental health.
Yes, create a culture where people feel safe asking for help without being judged.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected, Our actions impact those around us.
Exactly. And what's so inspiring about Johnson's message is that he emphasizes that individual action matters.
Even small acts of kindness.
Yes, he believes that even small acts of kindness can make a big difference. It's not about waiting for some big solution or a policy change. It's about what we do in our own lives with the people around us.
It's about taking those small steps to create a more caring and compassionate world.
Exactly. And what's interesting is that he recorded this video back in 2019, before the pandemic.
Before everyone was online all the time.
Right. Which makes me wonder, how do these strategies translate to the digital world? Can we offer the same kind of support online? Can we combat stigma effectively in a digital space?
That's a great question, especially considering how much of our lives are now online. Social media, while it can be great for connecting, can also be really negative.
Oh, absolutely. It's easier to say hurtful things online
Hmm.
when you're hiding behind a screen.
And it's harder to tell someone's tone online. Like, is that sarcasm or are they being serious?
For sure. So the online world presents its own set of challenges, but also opportunities. It can connect people who might feel isolated. There's tons of information and support available online.
So, how do we navigate this new landscape? How do we take what Johnson says and apply it to the way we interact online?
Let's break it down. How do we adapt communication, active listening, and giving time and energy to the digital world?
Okay, let's start with communication. How do we make sure our words are supportive and not hurtful online?
Well, remember those dismissive phrases Johnson talked about. They can be even more damaging online, where things can be screenshotted and shared.
Oh, right. It's like the internet never forgets.
Exactly. So we need to be more careful about what we say online, even in casual conversations.
So no more firing off a quick K or whatever.
Right. And while emojis can be helpful, they're not a replacement for real empathy and understanding.
It's easy to think that a thumbs up is enough, but it often feels, I don't know, impersonal.
Yeah, like you're not really taking the time to engage with what the person's saying.
What about active listening then? How can we do that online when you can't see the person's facial expressions or body language?
Well, we might lose some of those nonverbal cues, but there are still ways to show we're actively listening.
Like what?
Well, it starts with being present. When someone reaches out, put your phone down, close those other tabs, and really focus on what they're saying.
It's like making eye contact with someone in person.
Exactly. You're signaling that you're really listening and that what they have to say matters to you. And just like offline, asking clarifying questions and summarizing what they've said shows that you're engaged.
And don't forget about validating their feelings. A simple, "that sounds really hard," or "I can't imagine how tough that must be," can go a long way.
And sometimes the best thing you could do is just listen without judgment. Let them vent or process their emotions. You don't always need to offer advice or have all the answers. Sometimes just being there to listen is enough.
Okay, so we've talked about communication and active listening in the digital space. Now, what about giving time and energy online? How do we make sure our support goes beyond just liking a post or leaving a generic comment?
Well, that's where things get creative.
Oh, how so?
It's about thinking outside the box a little bit,
Yeah.
Finding ways to really show up for someone online.
So like sending a private message instead of just commenting publicly.
Yeah, exactly. It feels more personal, more genuine,
Less performative, I guess.
right? Or maybe sharing a resource you think might help, like a link to a support group or a mental health app, or even just a funny video to cheer them up.
Oh, I love that. It's those little things, those extra steps that really show you care.
And remember, just like offline, it's important to be honest about your availability.
And set boundaries.
Yeah. It's okay to say, I'm not the best person to give advice on this, but I can connect you with someone who might be.
Honesty and transparency are key, for sure.
It's always better to be upfront than to make promises you can't keep.
And, we can't forget about self-care, too.
Oh, absolutely. We can't pour from an empty cup. If you're feeling drained or overwhelmed, it's okay to take a step back and recharge.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple actions, choosing our words carefully, listening actively, offering support can make such a big difference.
It's true. And what's so inspiring about Johnson's message is that it applies everywhere. Online, offline, it doesn't matter.
It's a reminder that we're all human, we all need connection, we all need support sometimes.
We started this deep dive by looking at this lost media, this YouTube video that's vanished.
Like digital archaeologists sifting through the sands of time.
And what we found were these timeless insights about human connection and compassion. It's a message that transcends technology. It's about who we are as people.
So let's recap for our listeners. We've learned that awareness campaigns aren't enough. We have to go beyond just talking about mental health. We need to take action.
And those actions can be simple. Choosing our words thoughtfully, really listening when someone's talking, making an effort to offer genuine support.
And we talked about responsibility, too. It's not just on the individual to manage their mental health. It's a responsibility we all share.
Healthcare providers, support networks, society as a whole, we all have a role to play.
And as we spend more and more time online, it's more important than ever to find ways to adapt these strategies to the digital world.
To make sure everyone feels supported and valued online. It's a new frontier, but the core values are the same. Kindness, empathy, respect.
This deep dive has really made me think. It's challenged me to be more mindful of how I communicate and how I can be there for others.
Me too. And it's reminded me that even small acts of kindness can make a difference. We don't have to wait for big changes. We start making a difference right now.
So to our listeners, I want to leave you with a challenge. Think of someone in your life who might be struggling. What's one thing you can do this week, inspired by what you've learned today, to show them you care?
Maybe send a text, schedule a coffee date, just let them know you're thinking of them.
Because at the end of the day, we all need each other. We need to connect, understand, and support one another, both in the real world and online.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep exploring.